What is up, my Ammonites? It's your boy Yen Guy, and welcome back to the channel. And yes, once again, we are reacting to something very special from Goji Center. But before we do that, we gotta be asking ourselves one question. What happens when engined Jurassic Park T-Rex goes up against the natural Cretaceous version of the T-Rex? Did Engine ever get it right? Or is Rexy just a bad dud? Without further ado, let's take a deep dive into this, shall we? Here we go.
Today, the battle arena will witness two of the most iconic predators in history clash in a battle that will determine who is the superior Rex.
At least 100 years well known.
That does not take no for an answer. With feared reputation and queen of Isla Nublar, Jurassic's Rexy. On the other hand, a well-known predator proved to be a battle-hardened warrior with an imposing build, making it one of the largest Cretaceous predators ever found. Sue, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Everything we know about these two animals will
there are those in paleontology that tried to dethrone the king.
To determine which one of these Rexes will win in a face-off. Who wins and who falls defeated. This is T-Rex versus T-Rex. Killer versus killer.
Fact versus fiction.
Find out at the end on Monster Face-Off.
Let's go!
This face-off will involve both the most famous dinosaur in cinema and the best-studied dinosaur of all time. Although seemingly similar, both paleontological evidence and feats seen on screen differ greatly. Even the slightest nuance will be taken into account to reveal who takes the edge in each category.
Okay. Without going in too deep, just from what I'm seeing right here, Rexy is a lot taller and has a much longer legs, while Sue having a much bigger build and shorter legs. But keep in mind, this is actually a battle between range and weight. Who's got the bigger muscles? Who's got the best bite? We're about to find out.
At the end, we'll bear witness to a simulation pitting both of these animals and how they would react and deal with upon seeing each other for the first time.
But I'm not gonna lie, Rexy does have a much better looking head.
Mass. It goes without saying that Tyrannosaurus Rex had the most robust build out of any of the land predators
without any contest.
Every rendition of the T-Rex in the past, regardless of their paleo accuracy, is portrayed to be a powerful dinosaur with an imposing physique. Rexy was no different. Her design in the films is largely adherent to the Tyrannosaurus as it was known in the 1980s, and the design portrayals of said dates. More specifically, the T-Rex specimen in the American print. Her design in the films is in the 1980s, and the design...
Okay, so we got Kangaroo Rex in the 1910s, which... fun fact, is well over 100 years ago. Literally. And then you come...
Said dates.
Then the 1980s? Yeah, you get the idea.
Natural History Museum. Rexy, for her film debut, had very large feet, very skinny legs, a thin torso, and blocky face, with skin that is shrink-wrapped to the skeleton. This specimen, according to Dr. Thomas Carr,
actually a rather slim and athletic build for a large animal.
7.5 tons. This one had a taller build than many other Rexes, which does...
keep pausing in the wrong things.
Torso and blocky face with skin that is shrink-wrapped to the skeleton. This specimen, according to Dr. Thomas Carr, died out around the age of 26 and is estimated to have weighed 7 to 7.5 tons.
Pretty skinny. This pose right here, fun fact, was actually not intended to be the official design of the first portrayal of T-Rex. There was supposed to be a second T-Rex right about over here, but because there wasn't enough space, they just kept the pose right here. It was actually supposed to be back in the original basic design, But yeah, this is actually a classic pose until the 80s and 90s came along. Just wanted to throw that out there as a fun fact.
Taller build than many other Rexes, which does translate to Rexy, who has a height of up to 18 feet depending on posture. In today's battle simulation, and for the sake of fairness, we'll study Rexy at her prime. Her weight did fluctuate in the movies, being horribly skinny in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and visibly bulking up again in Jurassic World Dominion.
Yeah,
To
she
get the
is
most
a
accurate weight
monster.
measure possible, the Goji Center research team will resort to volumetric analysis, using a three-dimensional model of Rexy and scaling her to adult proportions. The end result being an animal weighing in at close to 8.
Okay, so 18 feet tall, almost 45 feet long, and almost 9 tons. Already looking at the pretty big monster, but let's see what Sue has to stack up against this.
0.86 tons. How will the paleo-accurate Sue compare? This was first known about around the year 1990, but wasn't studied until after Jurassic Park came out. At that point, Sue became easily one of the most understood T-Rex skeletons of all time. That, in addition to being one of the oldest.
Yeah, I really like the gameplay footage we're seeing here.
A T-Rex who survives this long would have been exceptionally large, which was the case for this animal.
And powerful.
New understanding of T-Rex now reveals that Sue was actually in the highest percentile when it came to...
And we do have a lot of specimens to go off of. I actually wonder if there's going to be one T-Rex that's going to be found every year. I mean, we're making dinosaur discoveries on the daily, so who knows?
Size. With other specimens like
We
Scotty
might
being
find
the
a
one other
50-foot
well-studied specimen
version
in
of
the
a T-Rex
Sue-size
at some
class.
point.
Sue is still easily way above average for a Tyrannosaurus. Because her skeleton is so complete, we can use volumetric analysis on her body to get a better idea of how massive she could have been. This was possible thanks to our friends at EOFauna, a team formed by researchers,
Hooray!
creatives,
We
and
got
specialists
shout-outs to
focused on prehistoric
collaborators.
fauna, who produce high-detailed and paleo-accurate models of several prehistoric creatures, such as Giganotosaurus, Ankylosaurus, the Paleoloxodon, and, of course, one of Sue. Using the most up-to-date skeletal reconstructions, EOFauna created the most accurate model.
And just watch. 5 to 10 years from now, this might actually not even be scientifically accurate. For all we know, they may have been maybe just rocks, for all we know. But that's just speculation. I mean, paleontology has come an extremely long way. I mean, we already figured out how to find the specific colors of different animals in prehistoric times.
Model of Sue possible at 1/35 scale. EOFauna provided Goji Center with a 3D model of this specific T-Rex specimen to step into the analysis platform and square off against Rexy later.
All right,
the
who's
results
it?
of the volumetric analysis place Sue in ranks much higher than previously estimated, which in the 90s was around 6 tons, but
Okay,
a more
and
accurate volumetric survey by Dan Folks instead puts Sue at...
okay, Sue. 13 feet at the hips, I'm guessing. About 40 feet long. You would think is actually pretty small for a T-Rex, but look over there. 10 tons. That's a lot of muscle, so like I said in the beginning of the video, this is going to be a battle between reach and true weight. So, who's got the bigger bite? Who's got the best range? We're going to find out.
Well over 10 tons, and potentially breaking
Size
11.
versus
Sue,
length.
compared to Rexy, had a much higher volume, despite being shorter. Generally speaking, Sue is about 20% more massive than Rexy at her highest weight estimate. Don't let this profile fool you. The volume difference is more noticeable up front, which will be the angle Rexy will be looking at the most during their encounter. The skull of Sue is longer and thicker, the torso is more robust, and the tail noticeably has more mass. mass. Rexy is a few feet taller than Sue depending on her posture, and to her proportionally long legs, her 4-foot length advantage is really due to a longer tail. So, who takes the edge?
I mean that's kind of debatable. You didn't put them perfectly side by side, but I'll forgive that.
In this case, being taller and lighter is going to give Rexy a higher center of gravity compared to Sue, meaning Sue will be much harder to topple over in a wrestling match. It will be Sue who will be likely to make the opponent take steps backward. In this category, Sue takes the edge for mass.
Yep.
But longer and taller will prove to have other benefits.
The range.
Number 2, reach.
There we go.
In this particular battle scenario between two of the same species, that being a species of animal that regularly got into fights with one another, we need to consider reach.
Tyrannosaurs in real life are extremely violent.
To strike first and more regularly.
Probably even more than we actually realize.
Show evidence of a myriad of bite marks and battle scars on the skull. This, amongst other findings, suggests that T-Rex relied on its skull as its primary offensive weapon.
Oh, yeah,
Based
there's
on this
the tail.
We can expect the simulation to show two T-Rexes facing each other at all times and wrestling head-on in order to be able to reach the most vulnerable areas. For this battle approach to work in favor of one contestant, body parts such as elongated torso and neck will be favorable. If we look at how Rexy was designed in Jurassic Park, we do notice an elongated neck. That and the fact that Rexy at her prime is actually 10% longer than Sue. Part of this would be the extended tail, however, but a good chunk was at the torso and neck.
I actually wonder if John Hammond wanted to design the monster as to look bigger than the real monster, the real animal would be. I'm sorry I keep saying they're monsters, but they, even though they're animals, but let's be honest, they're monstrously sized. They're both massive.
In a head-on collision, Rexy, in combination with her height, would have her jaws positioned to bite Sue's body sooner. And her being quick on her feet means exploiting this reach will be easier. Sue does have a proportionally longer skull. Her wide lower stance will make accessing points like Rexy's legs and arms easier as they are lower to the ground. But this does come at the cost of exposing the back of the neck and back muscles to Rexy. In most
But is it really exposed when you have more muscle?
Opportunities to strike thanks to her longer reach and ability to rear up a bit higher than Sue.
And that's not even accounting for the thick hide. That's a lot. That's also to consider.
Will probably be inflicted by the in-gen creation. Edge Rexy. Number 3, speed. For two large animals that will be fighting in close proximity,
longer legs means longer strides.
Important when winding up a charge or trying to pull a tactical retreat. In combat, the ability to withdraw at will is vital. The exact science on how fast a T-Rex can go has been debated back and forth, and is still debated today. The lighter reconstruction of T-Rex in the 90s and less precise measurement systems gave it the 25 to 35 mile per hour estimate. Consequently, Rexy was also given a speed within these parameters. Now, granted, this speed wasn't really showcased on screen, and also note that this recorded speed was taken from a T-Rex who wasn't fully grown, especially since we saw this same T-Rex break the scales at 44 feet in length upon maturing. Still, however, in-gen T-Rexes would be able to maintain a top speed of over 30 miles per hour, and we can see this play out in games such as Jurassic World Evolution, showcasing the narrow-framed T-Rex performing running gaits when moving at top speed. Various in-gen clones such as the Buck seen in The Lost World and Big and Little Edie were seen.
I did see them doing more of power walking or possibly a jogging motion.
With a moving helicopter.
But yeah,
it does seem that Rexy will require enough open space to build up her top speed instead of reaching it right away. For
you would not be in the way of that.
Things were a little different. Since Sue turned out to be a lot heavier than initially thought, the estimated top speed was reduced considerably for a big T-Rex. During its adolescent years, Tyrannosaurus would have been exceptionally fast.
The adolescence. A very interesting discovery in paleontology. I'm still looking forward to Kaiju, where we play as a little dinosaur. Yeah, gotta love little Tori. If you want to know about that, a little bit of that story, be sure to check out the reaction video of Kaiju. I think I'll leave a card somewhere that I don't know where, but check it out.
fast before it put on a lot of bulk, trading speed for sheer size as it grew. Sue at
Size
her prime
and power.
would be nowhere near as fast as she was when she was a teenager. The study of more updated models places the speed of 13 to 15 miles per hour for her size and age.
I
This
would have
metric
said at
is
least about
still
just
arguable.
no
For instance,
faster than 18.
paleontologist and research director at Eofana, Esier Laramendi, developed a mathematical equation for estimating theropod speed. In Sue's case, the initial calculation was 25 kilometers per hour, but was likely too conservative because the body mass boundary was too low. It was speculated that 35 kilometers per hour was more realistic. For comparison, that would be the top speed of a fit person running a 100-meter dash in 12 seconds. Estimates may change, but this is just to show Sue's top speed hasn't been set in stone yet. T-Rex legs were better for faster-paced movement than those of an elephant, and these animals already reached 25 kilometers.
But here's a little bit of an argument. Here's a little question. We know that Tyrannosaur lungs have very effective breathing apparatuses. Yeah, they have extremely efficient lungs. So stamina would probably be a very large factor into going into this fight. So I would imagine that there would be that T-Rex would probably be doing marathons to catch its prey instead of ambushing. I could be wrong, but stamina is a factor. I wonder if they're gonna bring that up.
Kilometers per hour. So this is why many paleontologists speculate that animals like Sue could fast walk at higher speeds. Truth be told, there's absolutely no real reason for these two animals to be running at full sprint during the majority of the fight, only needing to run this fast when ramming or running away. In this fight, Rexy will have the best
Or
chance
making
to
the
pull off a
final
retreat
push during
quicker
that
if things turn
marathon.
south and move to better terrain if the environment allows it. For this category, Rexy takes the edge in speed. Number 4, agility. More important than speed when locked into close quarter
this
combat,
is where
the
you
winner
gotta
of this edge
weave,
will have a
dive,
critical
and
advantage
duck.
when it comes to targeting vital areas
And
and
dodge.
getting around the opponent. The InGen Tyrannosaurus have been regularly outflanked, even by larger dinosaurs. In the midst of combat, they tend to rapidly step around in order to change position and direction. Despite being smaller and lighter, the bull from JP3 had a hard time staying atop the Spinosaurus.
Yeah,
and
right.
Big Edie from Camp Cretaceous was roughly comparable against the same foe. This is in stark contrast to the real thing. It is actually possible that some of the large predators in the same size class as T-Rex could run faster, but this comes with a trade-off: maneuverability. We've discussed the specifics of Tyrannosaur hip anatomy before, but this advantage cannot be understated. T-Rex shares common ancestors with Coelurosaurs, like birds and raptors, those who climbed trees and made their way through thick forests, while at the
So
same
they're
time the
basically-
ancestors of giant...
So they're basically the equivalent to us humans. We used to be tree-climbing creatures until we moved out to the plains, and then became extremely dangerous hunters, and all the way into the very same creatures that are sitting at home watching TV to this very day. I actually wonder if that's the path that the T-Rex would have chosen. Very interesting thoughts.
Carnosaurs like Spinosaurus and the Giga were roaming open spaces. In this case, Sue's hip anatomy is much more optimized for agility than speed. To put this very simply, if a dinosaur's anatomy has better muscles and bones for speed, this means that there is a deficit on agility. In contrast, legs built to help maintain stamina but also change direction quickly have to sacrifice rigidity for agility. Whatever InGen did to increase their T-Rex speed might have compromised some of their agility. This is why even a fully grown Tyrannosaurus could make a 180-degree pivot on a single foot, being capable of rapidly changing direction. For comparison, note that the same study that found T-Rex to be as agile as it was gave it a score of about 2 to 2.5 times higher than that of Giganotosaurus, despite T-Rex being heavier. In Jurassic World, Rexy was only roughly as agile as the Giga in Dominion, despite it being noticeably heavier. In this upcoming battle simulation, the extraordinarily fast animal will witness how surprisingly agile its ancestor actually was. For this category, Sue takes the edge.
Oh,
for
it's not
agility.
looking good for you,
Number
Rexy.
5, senses. It's now time
And
to discuss
it's
the battle
looking
attribute
even
that will allow
worse.
one of these to be able to lock into the opponent, but more importantly, who can spot the other first. This helps with setting up surprise attacks or making hiding useless if one of them decides to run away. Both animals have extremely good senses of smell, which means ambushing the other by pure
But
scent
hearing
protection
and sight
is an even game,
easily
and
go
would
to
rely more
go
on
to
who would
Sue.
be able to position themselves upwind, or just make less noise before they're spotted. The thick pads on Sue's feet and the ability for her to pick up on low-frequency sounds would...
How did the paleontologists figure that out? I mean, logically speaking, it would make sense. I mean, elephants have this ability, but how would they have known about that in giant theropods? That makes... I mean, it's cool. I mean, I'm not gonna contest it, but how did they figure that out? Was it the foot... I would imagine it had something to do with the footprints. Anyway, it was just a question. Sorry to pause, but
Make it
proceeding.
easy for Sue to pick up on Rexy's booming footsteps, in contrast to her own, which makes her almost undetectable to the ear. For actual fighting, however, the main concern would be the eyesight, and this is where things can get tricky. The eyesight of Sue and Rexy may initially seem similar, but there's more than meets the eye here. Sue would have a 55-degree field of binocular vision and a highly developed fovea. Rexy, on the other hand, due to her eye orientation and broadened snout, would have less binocular vision than Sue. This does mean that Rexy would have a wider range of vision than Sue. Rexy's eyesight does have an infamous drawback that we must mention.
Yep, the frog
In the Jurassic
DNA.
franchise, the concept of whether or not a T-Rex can see stationary objects has gone back and forth. Putting it all together, the answer might be that they can see stationary objects, but would key in on moving targets a whole lot more.
Just like
This
frog
lack of
eyes
precise vision
and the frog
might also
brain.
explain why InGen T-Rexes in many situations in the franchise tend to flail about, attacking anything they can reach instead of focusing on potential weak spots that would end the battle much quicker. And let's be real, with that kind of bite, T-Rex would end all fights very fast. But in many cases, they didn't. They just try to bite down and bash anything they can get in striking range. This also suggests a less than optimal degree in depth perception.
Yep,
Sue, meanwhile, like most real-life Tyrannosaurus, had superb vision, and especially perception.
Yeah, forget staying
As stated
still.
In a presentation by Dr. Thomas Holtz, a key reason why T-Rex had a good depth perception might have been in part adapting to dodge retaliation attacks from very directional-oriented opponents like Triceratops.
And Ankylosaurus. I mean, you gotta dodge the weaponry somehow. And also, you gotta also factor in the giant hadrosaurs that are running around in the Sue's time. I mean, they look like helpless equivalent to horses, but swing that tail could easily shatter bones, and just the sheer size alone is easily dangerous for any predator.
Where you have to get around the horns to avoid getting hurt and injure the prey animal. So, knowledge of where the critical points are isn't going to do you much good if you don't have the ability to accurately hit them. Her wide field of vision would allow Rexy to not be snuck up on by other animals, but at the cost of precision. Sue has the entire fossil record speaking in her favor, with plenty of fossils showing evidence that T-Rex would bite the tail to disable locomotive muscles, restraining the frill of a Triceratops to avoid getting bored, or controlling the face of another T-Rex to avoid getting bit. Rexy's more maniac strategy, because of her senses, would probably land more hits, but Sue would likely be targeting critical points. For this...
So it's a battle with multiple jabs versus calculated heavy hits. Or in Monster Hunter terms, dual blades versus greatsword. Which is more dangerous? And there's also the factor of the frog DNA. Sorry, Rexy, but you really need to work on getting that frog out of your system.
Category, the edge will go to Sue. Number 6, experience.
There
This
it
may
is.
seem like an odd thing to quantify, but if we're going to compare an animal that lived in the wild in a natural ecosystem with
it's
regular
no
growth
contest.
patterns and a wide variety of opponents to a bioengineered creature growing in an artificial ecosystem, then
And this is another question you should ask. What's gonna be a more dangerous fighter? A wolf that's lived its whole life in the wild? Or a wolf that's lived its whole life in captivity? Or actually, if a more accurate question would be, would a tiger that's lived its life in the wild be more dangerous than a tiger that's lived in captivity? That's the real analogy we should be looking at here.
yes, discussing this attribute is a must. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that Sue was an individual with tons of valuable experience under her belt.
Oh,
the
yeah.
most important being encounters with other predators and prey. Remnant evidence of this is the myriad of healed battle scars and
that's
injuries
during
on the
the
face and body, showing old wounds,
fossilization
infections,
process.
and healed
That is not a
fractures.
good look.
Broken ribs that healed might have come from hunts or fights with other tyrannosaurs.
Oh.
If we take into account the type of dinosaurs that Sue hunted down, compare them with those that Rexy had to encounter on a regular basis, we'll see that there is a difference in the type of dangers both had to encounter.
Yeah, see,
Better
the
adept and
hadrosaur is
larger quantity of
dangerous.
ceratopsians, hadrosaurs that dwarfed the pathetic miniature-sized Parasaurolophus and Oranosaurus from Nublar, and higher number of T-Rex encounters than...
Yeah, see? I was telling you, the hadrosaurs of Sue's time are way bigger than what we see InGen produce. I mean, that tail right there, that could easily shatter bones. And they being acting more like horses, and likely living in social groups, and having a sharp beak. Yeah, Sue would have a very hard time bringing even this down. I mean, they look defenseless, but they will kill you!
Rexy ever had. Fossils of several prey animals, including one of a T-Rex, show that the tail was a primary target. One of the most popular findings in T-Rex research was that of the infamous Y-Rex, a T-Rex specimen that...
I actually wonder if whether or not Tyrannosaurs would have a civilization that actually forbids anyone from biting the tail, cause that's basically the equivalent of getting kicked in the balls. Or, actually, no, I take that back. That would be the equivalent of getting your balls snipped. That is horrible. Ugh, that is horribly brutal. Ugh. And it probably would, and for some, that could even be a death sentence.
that was found with part of its tail missing. The common consensus being that it was probably another T-Rex that bit it off, suggesting that animals like Sue would consider this body part as a target and a way to handicap.
That's just me
another
assuming
rival
that
predator into
Tyrannosaurs had
mobility in the
human
future.
sapience.
An animal as old as Sue would have had an opportunity to inflict these countermeasures against other T-Rexes more frequently, whereas Rexy couldn't. Rexy, throughout her life, has faced a much lesser amount of larger theropods. It is important to mention now that Rexy is legendarily aggressive. Almost every single time she encountered another large carnivore, not of her own kind, her instinct was to attack it. Even when the dinosaur is physically bigger than her, she still rushes it. And every single time, she
And
ended
that's
up
why
losing.
she's still
This
the
also
GOAT.
translates when it hunts. Unlike the real animal, Rexy seems to be very noisy and reckless. It was only after her later years when we saw her make smarter decisions, like backing off when facing a superior animal like Biosyn's modified Giga. This, however, was knowledge that would have been acquired by Sue
Oh, look! There's the
much
juvenile
earlier in her
Rex!
lifetime. While Sue would have spent most of her life out in the wild growing up amidst other deadly herbivores and rivals.
Shoutouts to Goji Center, man. They're really getting the mods
as the
in.
main entree. For this category, the clear edge will go
Yeah,
to Sue for
very
combat
clear.
experience. Number 7, intelligence.
This
Before
is
we
a big
compare
one.
these
I was
crushing bite
mentioning
forces,
hints on
let's
this.
try to figure out who would have a better chance of figuring out the opponent's intentions and weaknesses faster than the other. InGen T-Rexes show pretty advanced intelligence, especially when coupled with others of their own kind or by themselves. Jurassic Rex's behavior inclines slightly towards the emotional realm. One example is how she willfully didn't attack Blue after the Indom was dealt with.
Yeah, I didn't even consider that. They're surprisingly into
Rexy simply being pragmatic is debatable. But consider how this same thing happened when Therizinosaurus showed up to attack the Giga. Here, Rexy chose to not attack the Therizinosaurus afterwards. Again, whether this was a form of respect or just simply self-preservation, it still proves that Rexy has moments where she can make good decisions. Rexes in this franchise are quite...
I mean, it could have been... I mean, if you look back at that final strike, if you notice that when Rexy was grabbing the Giga, she actively threw the Therizinosaurus, and of course, the Xeno actually instinctively moved its hands to stab the Giga. So there is a bit of calculating moves there. So it was probably a case of Rexy actually recognizing a dangerous thing and using that to her full advantage.
Vengeful and will look to get payback given the opportunity, such as the grudge that laid waste to parts of San Diego after the Bucks offspring.
That's not Rexy, though. That's the bull. I mean, yes, it is an InGen T-Rex, but that's not Rexy.
Was taken from him, or Big Edie looking for a rematch after the Spino initially took her down. Back to Rexy, we see her constantly use the environment to her advantage.
Yeah, see? There you go again, using the advantage.
Realizing that just biting down wasn't really working, and figuring out that throwing the Giga into another opponent, one with really pointy weapons that is, would likely end bad for the Giga. And it sure as hell was. Actions such as testing the electric fence before proceeding to knock it all the way
battle
down
tactics.
Are all examples that Rexy, like the other InGen creations, were some of the smartest animals in this franchise. These are all feats seen on camera, but what about those of a specimen that died 66 million years ago?
There's a real question.
An already extinct animal is difficult. Methods such as brain-to-body ratios in certain animals have already been proven to be inaccurate in some cases, especially when it comes to birds and reptiles. Being bird-brained per se is actually kind of a compliment, as these modern dinosaurs have typically extremely dense neuron networks in their brains.
Exhibit A, the crows and ravens. Surprisingly intelligent. And then there's also the crocodiles that are already learning how to lure their victims into the water for an easier kill. That's nightmare fuel!
Despite them being small, larger animals tend to have proportionally smaller brains, and is led on the stereotype idea that dinosaurs, especially the really big ones, are dumb. T-Rex had one of, if not the largest brain of all dinosaurs, both in absolute terms and just relative to its size. Social behaviors are one of the only concrete pieces of evidence we have, with more evidence of T-Rex cooperating with each other than what we have of raptors. This, along with a fairly lengthy growth stage and not reaching full size until 20
Imagine
years old,
a nightmare of tyrannosaurs running around.
And watching individuals from their own group. Not all T-Rexes growing up would have made it to adulthood. A common trait of infantile behavior is recklessness, so there would be cases in which a less intelligent Rex would get itself killed in front of another T-Rex who surely won't make the same mistake again.
Natural selection.
Probably being one of them. T-Rex bites to the horns and frill of Triceratops, tail of Edmontosaurus, and face of Ankylosaurs shows these predators knew how to disable prey effectively by both avoiding their weapons and
they're
minimizing
hunting
the chance of getting
Ankylosaurs.
hurt. The common estimate accepted amongst many scientists has it that T-Rex was as intelligent as many modern predators, such as large cats and birds of prey. All of these animals do show the vengeful traits that were seen in the InGen Rexes, who do share complex affection and care for each other. For this category, a fair level of intelligence is an attribute equally present in both of these animals.
But there was actually one study that would suggest that tyrannosaurs were probably smart as baboons or chimpanzees. Probably exaggerated, but it's definitely an interesting thing to consider. I did say that tyrannosaurs might have a human equivalent society. Wait, I mean, I don't know.
making this a draw in intelligence. Now, let's get to the bloody business.
Here we go, the weapons!
Bite effectiveness. Now it's time to delve into the legendary bite force that established T-Rex as the sovereign apex land predator of all time. Furthermore, this fight will feature two very similar bite forces, but the damage inflicted isn't entirely identical. Both tyrannosaurs have roughly comparable sized jaws and teeth. Depending on how many teeth make contact, the PSI metric for the bite force could vary wildly, but averaged between 8K to 10K PSI. Because both and real T-Rex
don't want to get crushed by those.
The main focus of this section and what will determine who has the most effective bite will be the slight nuances in the shape of the teeth. The narrower, more knife-like serrated shaped teeth of Jurassic Park T-Rexes were modified by the animatronics modeling team to make them look more menacing than the real thing. Believe it or not, this seemingly more frightening look ironically hinders the full bite force potential. Yes, knife-like serrated teeth like those of the Giga and Carcharodontosaurus are better for slicing and shredding victims, so in theory, shouldn't these InGen T-Rex teeth have the ability to slice and shred like a Carnosaur? To a degree, yes, but there's a reason why Carcharodontosaurid skulls look like this and not like this. For these knife-like teeth to work effectively, the shape of the skull and articulation on the jaw muscles made it easier for the Giga to open its mouth wider and snap down much quicker than any T-Rex could. Carnosaurs like the Giga would bite with rapid movements and cause lacerations and extremely bloody wounds. The actual T-Rex had a very different strategy. And Jurassic, as they normally do in this franchise, ended up nerfing Rexy's bite by mounting on the wrong teeth. The real T-Rex teeth are serrated and can lacerate flesh, but their more robust teeth are actually primarily built for piercing, gripping, and wrenching off
a lot like
chunks of meat.
pickaxes.
These may possibly be the culprit as to why most of the bites from an InGen T-Rex are easily shrugged off by rival predators. For a T-Rex, securing a firm hold is crucial. With an 8 to 10,000 PSI bite force, teeth that slice through flesh this easily wouldn't really hold too well, but cut just fine. And yes, this will most definitely be painful. But the real T-Rex teeth, in contrast, are a different story.
Cause it'll crunch your bones to bake its bread.
Between 28 to 63 degrees would inflict the highest biting pressure around the latter part of the jaw. Biting on anything too wide would diminish bite force. And yes, this rule will apply to both T-Rexes. But for Sue, this wouldn't be a big deal. Remember, real T-Rex depth perception was superior, which allows it to pinpoint exactly where to bite and where it will be most effective. This gets worse. Another study showed that unlike other theropods, T-Rex teeth differed slightly across the maw. The teeth in front were for securing a firm grip, whereas the middle ones punched deep and the ones in the back applied the most force. Although Rexy's superior range might make it land more hits, one well-targeted bite from Sue would be catastrophic.
There it is!
As soon as these
Dual
teeth
blades
sink in,
versus
the only way
greatsword.
to escape would be to leave a chunk of flesh behind. And be it a vital organ or vulnerable area, the opponent will most definitely be looking at a potential fatal injury. The real thing shows why nature's authentic product once again proves superior. For this category, Sue takes the edge for bite effectiveness. Part 9, Auxiliary Weapons. Apart from using their skull for inflicting lethal bites, and given that in this fight both of these combatants will be looking straight at each other for the majority of the fight, both animals will likely use their skulls as a form of blunt force weapon. Now, Tyrannosaurus Rex was not specialized for head bashing like Carcharodontosaurids, but they could manage some pretty respectable forces with their robust skulls and mass. The points of contact that we'll compare in this section will be the lacrimal and postorbital bones, forming the brow ridge. One might think that these two Rexes have identical skulls, but just like animals today, not every skeleton is exactly the same. And this is the case with both the skulls of Sue and Rexy. For Rexy, we'll take impact surface area and speed into account. Forming a speculative reconstruction of her skull based on head shape, we see that her postorbital bones are pointed, meaning the force will focus on a smaller area, yielding a higher PSI.
So it's gonna look like Rexy's gonna take this one.
A hit that inflicts 11,000 PSI. Assuming Rexy was able to wind up enough speed and rammed the opponent perfectly. Committing to such blows does have risks, especially if striking another skull head-on. Instead, Rexy would aim to hit a soft area such as the flank or rib cage, causing bruising, or if Sue is caught off guard, fracturing some ribs. By comparison, Sue had a much more smoother skull compared to many tyrannosaurs. Even with any keratinous brow buildup, the point of contact would be spread along a wider area. Even factored in with her top running speed, this would still inflict lower damage forces than Rexy. A more tenable strategy would be leveraging her faster rotation speed. This way, Sue would likely deploy head bashing, pivoting on her feet to swing aside to bludgeon if
Kinda
they can't
like
land
what a
bite.
giraffe does.
Doing so with optimal windup might produce forces of up to 4,500 psi over a wide area. Now, admittedly, both the 11,000 and 4,500 psi would happen under optimal circumstances. So, logically speaking, the final impact forces in a fight would be much lower. In order for this to be at all effective, Sue would have to use this maneuver to spar or even parry an incoming bite from Rexy. This is extremely useful and may open a way for a counterattack, especially coming from an aggressive Rexy. The edge for this category will be given to an animal that can inflict the most damage. If Rexy does decide to wind up a charge with enough distance and actually lands a hit, the damage will be greater, weakening or bruising Sue if hit on the right spot. The numbers speak for themselves, and Rexy's impact force is indeed greater. Whether Sue is able to reverse this or survive this impact remains to be seen, but for this category, Rexy will take a clear edge when it comes to auxiliary weapons. We are almost ready to unleash our combatants to the simulation.
Where does the fight begin?
The X Factor attribute. Today,
I forgot this one.
Will be taken into account. In this special edition of Monster Face
this
Off,
adds
we'll
to
include
strategy.
this new attribute to explain something interesting that may or may not occur in this fight. In the real world, encounters between two apex predators tend to end with the loser retreating from the fight. No point in culminating a battle that was clearly lost. This was most likely the case back when a T-Rex encountered another T-Rex. In the past, carnivores absolutely could be brutal, but only to the same degree that they are now. A study on lion fatalities by George B. Scheller and a similar study of tigers found that same-species combat accounts for only 15% of adult fatality rates. This sounds like a lot, but that is actually lower than combat with other different species. Similarly, we can deduct that the vast majority of the fights between the two Rexes did not end in fatalities. Numerous healed injuries on the face of T-Rex skeletons are a testament to this.
Yikes!
Not that they couldn't
I
kill
told
each
you,
other, they
tyrannosaurs are
certainly
violent!
could. It's just that they didn't have to kill each other every time. InGen theropods, meanwhile, were anything but cautious, and self-preservation was something that wasn't kept in mind in most cases. Spinosaurus and Indominus are examples of borderline psychos when they get angry, and InGen T-Rex were no different. Almost every single time one of the T-Rex clones encountered another large theropod, they immediately go on the attack first. It makes sense that a lot of the promo material shown before Dominion's release categorized Rexy with a very high aggression level. The moment any downed InGen T-Rex catches a second wind, they are right back on attack mode. Big Edie did something similar after recovering from the neck injury, rushing back to attack the Spino, and this happened here in Dominion. After being driven back by the Giga in the first skirmish, what does this aging Rexy do? Travel through a burning forest, no heed towards any fire, to square up with a predator bigger, stronger, and much younger than her, and attack again. Why does this happen? And is there a way to explain what inevitably might happen in this face-off?
It's the frog DNA, likely.
Might be partially responsible. Rexy went from hatchling to full size in only a few years. By comparison, a natural T-Rex would usually take 18 to 20 years to grow to considerable size. A real T-Rex's size would plateau at a certain age, only growing very slowly, increasing bulk as years went by. Rexy, in contrast, kept going at a steady pace in a very short time.
A lot like the clone troopers in Star Wars. We can make usually soldiers who needed to grow for a whole lifetime, but now we can make them in only half the time.
This implies something strange going on with her pituitary gland. Maybe an intentional genetic alteration to try and quickly stock the first park with more impressive adult-sized dinosaurs, or this may have been an accident in the gene splicing phase. This gland in the brain is what controls and regulates growth, so disorders here can also affect the adrenal gland. This might explain the heightened aggression and higher than typical hunger response. This urge to attack regardless of anything and depression odds backed up by adrenal imbalances.
Metabolism, didn't consider that.
Similarly, a more calmed approach and self-preservation may also kick in after. We are now ready to reveal which T-Rex will crown itself with the coveted title of Tyrant Queen. Jurassic's Rexy wins the edge in having superior reach, faster running speed, and auxiliary weapons.
All right.
Sue, in her imposing form, wins the edge in overall mass, agility, senses, experience, and bite effectiveness. Both prove to be intelligent combatants thanks to feats seen on screen and evidence from the fossil record. Today's T-Rexes will see each other for the first time alongside the plains and forests of the Hell Creek Formation. The stage is set. The combatants are ready. Coming up, Jurassic Park's Rexy versus Sue.
Here we go! Let's go! All right. Sue just killed an Edmontosaur. Uh-oh. Ah, I see what you're going with, Goji Center. Oh, there's the intruder. Who you guys voting for? Leave it there in the comments below. Pause real quick and we'll find out. My personal vote is T-Rex. Either or. Uh-oh. Here we go! Different roars! And there's that aggression! Oof! They're right at the tail! Boom! Yep, get out of the way! Boom! There's that side swipe again! Oh! Oh! That was an arm! Oh, now Rexy's really mad! And he's going for the bite. Oh, yep, there it is. Oh, yeah, and there's the oh, no. It's gonna be a rip, isn't it? Ah! The tree! Oh, and... yeah, it's crushing! There it is! Oh, Rexy, you're not looking so good. And you had to eat it too.
In this battle simulation, it was Sue who came out victorious in this fight. For the first time ever in Monster Face-Off, the winner of the fight did not inflict the killing blow. This is because,
it may as well have.
Territorial dispute, the defeated dinosaur would rather take off instead of culminating an already determined loss. Had Rexy won this encounter, the end result might have been different. So, why did Sue win? Both Rexy and Sue did win the edge in important attributes, but the factors that carried more weight in this particular battle were a combination of mass, senses, experience, and bite effectiveness. This battle began with both T-Rexes being able to detect each other from far away. Both Sue and Rexy did know where a very large predator was lurking about in the same area. It was Sue, however, who managed to stealthily find Rexy first, startling her into an aggressive encounter. Rexy, as usual, would have been the first aggressor. Sue, in contrast, would have been looking to settle this dispute in a non-violent manner. But Rexy isn't wired like she is. This fight
that
escalated
frog
a
brain.
little too quickly.
It's the frog
Upon
DNA
charging,
that
the
did her in.
Rexy attempts to strike first. What should have been an initial bite turned into a missed headbutt into the flank and thigh of Sue, who with her greater agility managed to switch lanes and avoid the first bite. Sue's maneuverability now places her in a position to bite a quickly moving Rexy, managing to bite and tear off a small chunk of flesh from the tail. Fully engaged in combat, Sue now targets the caudofemoralis muscle in an attempt to handicap the quicker opponent. Rexy, on the other hand, just now ran into a shorter but agile T-Rex. For her, it was as if she ran into a wall. After another wrestling match, Rexy's longer reach and more bladed teeth managed to inflict some nasty cuts on Sue, but it was only a matter of time before Sue managed to hit something that mattered. After missing the caudofemoralis for the second time due to her shorter reach, she quickly opts for a proportionally longer arm of Rexy, wrenching it off. After this type of injury, this is where a T-Rex territorial dispute would likely end. Any other T-Rex would back off at this point, but this isn't just any other T-Rex. This is Rexy we're talking about, so it will take a bit more to
her
turn
pride
her
was
away.
wounded.
Unable to reach the
Literally.
locomotive muscles, Sue now resorts to yet another common attack maneuver against other T-Rexes, a bite to the head. With Sue's stronger teeth dug deep in her skull, and Rexy never in her life feeling anything like this, she decides that enough is enough and breaks for it. Sue, however, is not finished. Now with her primary target in range, Sue now grabs a good hold of Rexy's tail. Once a T-Rex bites its teeth into something, it's just as good as lost. Rexy, in desperation and already with her mind set on retreating, leaves her tail behind. Sue, upon witnessing Rexy walk away, does not pursue. The point has most definitely been made, and Rexy will never enter this territory again. Years of paleontological study on the most popular dinosaur of all time.
Will she survive after
remind us
that?
of how
I don't
biology
know.
and years of evolution brought forth the perfect killing machine. A perfect balance of raw strength, agility, and brains. The product of nature itself once again proves to be second to none. Far superior than the tampered product of mankind.
Yeah, that is, such savagery. Well, guys, that was the battle. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and let me know what you guys thought of that fight. Who did you vote for? If you did, please be sure, and if you did like this video and you want more of these, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, get lucky today, and as always, my Ammonites, I will see you at the next dive. Yen bye and good night.